So President Obama today blaming the United States, blaming the U.S. for gun violence in Mexico. Mr. Obama attempting to convince his audience that gun control laws passed by the U.S. Congress will, in fact, benefit Mexicans. Listen.
And we also recognize that most of the guns used to commit violence here in Mexico come from the United States. I think many of you know that in America our Constitution guarantees our individual right to bear arms. And as President, I swore an oath to uphold that right, and I always will. But at the same time, as I've said in the United States, I will continue to do everything in my power to pass common sense reforms that keep guns out of the hands of criminals and dangerous people.
Fast and Furious, remember that? The President did not mention the Justice Department's Fast and Furious gun-running operation that led to thousands of weapons being lost in Mexico. Meanwhile, in Houston today, a different message on gun control as some 70,000 people take part in this year's National Rifle Association convention. Our next guest has been at the convention all day, joining us, Emily Miller, the senior opinion editor for the Washington Times. Emily, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
First, give us your reaction. What was your impression to the president blaming the U.S. for Mexico's gun violence?
It's quite astounding that the President of the United States is so desperate to infringe on Second Amendment rights that he's going to tell Mexicans that's one of the reasons is to make them safer. As soon as I heard the speech, I interviewed Governor Rick Perry, Texas governor who's down here, obviously a border state, about it, and he was literally shocked speechless, and it took him a few minutes to recover, and then he said, I am incredulous that the President of the United States would go to Mexico and say this is what we're doing, and he said, this is exactly the reason this president has absolute complete disdain for the Constitution and wants to disarm the public, and that's what Rick Perry said.
Hey, as a sidebar, I read your piece on Rick Perry, and he actually doesn't rule out another run for president, right?
It was interesting. I asked him, and I thought he would sort of hem and haw, and he said, I will make a decision by the end of this year, 2013, about 2016, and I got the impression that he was leaning in that direction.
Interesting. All right, so back to this NRA meeting. Sorry. What do you think of the new president, James Porter? His quote, of course, it's not a battle of gun rights. It's a culture war. I think a lot of people agree with that. But do you think, too soft, or did you want to hear him come out a little stronger in his case?
Well, I wrote a profile about Mr. Porter this week because it is interesting that he's taking over the presidency from David Keene, who's been the president for 2 years. David Keene, as you know, has been on Fox a lot. He's very comfortable with the media, with me, with other reporters. Mr. Porter's a different type of president. He's a little bit less comfortable with the media, publicity shy. But what David Keene and everyone agrees that he brings to the table in this next 2 years is he's a lawyer and he can build a legal team, because the NRA has said we've almost won the fight on Capitol Hill. We've won, we don't see anything more going to happen on Capitol Hill. We're keeping up vigilance, but where this fight goes now is in the courts in the states to push back on the laws in New York, Colorado, Maryland, Connecticut that are so radical and clearly unconstitutional. And somebody like Jim Porter is that kind of legal brain that can do that for them.
Do you think that Jim Porter would be behind, and the NRA would be behind, Senator Manchin, the West Virginia Democrat, is now reintroducing the bill to require criminal and mental background checks at gun shows and online? So again, do you think that this new president would support the NRA getting behind that reintroduction of a bill like this?
Absolutely not. The NRA is absolutely opposed to Mr. Manchin's efforts. As you know, Senator Toomey has already dropped out of them. And they're going to defend all of the senators, Democrats and Republicans, who voted for the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. They are not going to support expanding background checks. What they are doing, which they are doing proactively, and all the board members are talking about in all the meetings that are going on this week, is they want to get the NICS system, which is the FBI background checks, fixed so that mental health records are put in them. Right now, they're not. They also want to get prosecutions up. So people who go and buy guns, who are felons, who are crazy, and all these things that are banned, the Obama administration isn't prosecuting them. They're walking out of the store. They're not getting caught. It's a felony charge. So those are the things that actually could possibly make our country safer, protect our children, and that's what the NRA and its members and its board are doing in the next few years.
Senator Ted Cruz, also a speaker at the NRA Association meeting here, challenging the vice president to a debate. Obviously, the vice president say he's going to go on a speaking tour promoting tighter gun control laws. Do you take him seriously? Do you think that could happen?
I don't think Biden would do it because Biden really doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, Ted Cruz, you know, he was one of the plaintiffs in the Heller case. He really knows his stuff when it comes to the Second Amendment. I mean, Joe Biden's telling people to shoot through a closed door. I mean, he doesn't have a whole lot of credibility on these issues, and I don't think he would ever do it with a senator because it would kind of, you know, he's the vice president. It might put him down a notch. But I mean, I think everyone, whether it's the NRA president or Ted Cruz or any of the leading Second Amendment rights people, would love to debate Mike Bloomberg or Joe Biden because they have the facts on their side. Unfortunately, Joe Biden and Mike Bloomberg won't debate these people and have turned down repeated requests from the NRA to do that.
But I'll tell you, Mike Bloomberg, he's got some deep pockets to support his effort. We know he spent $600 million of his own dough just on his anti-smoking campaign. You've got the vice president. And you've also just got, it's just such a tall wall, if you will.
I'll tell you, this Bloomberg money changes the dynamic, and why maybe this is the biggest, some people say this is the biggest fight against gun control in 20 years. I would say it's probably worse than '94 because of the factor of you've got this billionaire, Mike Bloomberg, who will outspend the NRA 100-time-fold. I mean, and can and will. He spent $12 million leading up to the Senate race in 3 weeks. So they have this dynamic. Well, what the NRA has that Bloomberg doesn't have is 5 million law-abiding, decent Americans in their organization. They have an amazing grassroots operation. Yeah. They are so fully engaged, and I saw that all this week at the meetings.
All right, well said. Emily Miller, thank you for joining us.